One of the big things that came out of this House GOP bill that passed last night, 217 to 215, is that there will be no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security. Now, I am as much of an anti-tax guy as anybody else. What we should do, if we really want to simplify the tax code and the tax system, is have a flat tax. Everybody plays whatever it is, 10, 12, 15%. First off, everyone has skin in the game. There's not this like half the population pays zero in taxes deal going on, which is really just a way to buy votes from one political party. We've all got some skin in the game. We're all equals when it comes to what we pay. I think there will be economic benefits from it, but I realize that that's not realistic, sadly. So they extended Donald Trump's tax plan from 2017 last night in this bill that passed the House. Now it goes to the Senate. This was always going to be something that had to be done. But they also added no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security. So I said last night on social media, and I really just wanted to get your feedback, that I think no tax on tips is actually a bad idea. And it will cause issues, especially in the hospitality industry in particular, where already, it's hard enough to find people that want to work in the back of restaurants. People always want to be on the front end where you're getting more of the tips. But now if you're not taxing those tips, that's only going to grow the gap in the hospitality field in particular. Even if you're pooling some of the tips together for people who are busboys and busgirls and things like that, there's going to be a gap there that I don't believe is going to be beneficial for the industry. Now, who's going to be able to use the no tax on tips? Well, people, waiters, bartenders, beauticians, in the traditionally tipped occupations, they're the ones who won't have taxes on tips. But let's be honest, too. And I have not done a good job of this lately. No excuses, but I try to tip in cash when I can. I just haven't had a lot of cash on me lately. Maybe it's having 3 little kids running around that I just don't think about having cash on me as much. But no one pays taxes on cash, tips. And little secret, you shouldn't. As someone who used to work for cash tips, no one pays cash or no one pays taxes on their cash tips. No one does it. So as long as people are paying cash, well, guess what? You're not going to be paying taxes on that anyway. And you shouldn't have to pay taxes on that. I mean, I guess you should, but most people don't do it anyway. So what's the point in this? To me, it's all political posturing is what it is. Steve's in Gladstone. He's on KCMO. First up. What's up, Steve?
Good morning, Pete. How are you?
What's going on, man?
Well, you may be right, political posturing and stuff, but as a person that survived off tips for about 10 years, it's a big thing. I mean, you work for $5 an hour. I drove a van for a hotel, and also I was a bellboy. And, $5 an hour driving a van. Back then, that was, standard pay. But the tips really, help pay the rest of the bills. And back then it was all cash. That's great. Now you brought a thing about it's all digital now. No one really tips in cash. And when you said, they don't really tax the tips. Well, yes, they do now because it is digitized.
Yeah.
I mean, when it's digitized, and that's the way the business.
But be honest, Steve, you weren't paying. Steve, you were not paying taxes on all of those cash tips you got. I mean, you weren't, and I don't blame you. I wasn't doing it.
You're misunderstanding me. You're misunderstanding. You're right. I did not back then, but now it's different because most of the tips now are on a credit card or a debit card, and it's run through the register.
Yeah.
And once it's run through the register, it's added up by whoever the manager is, and then at that next paycheck time comes out, they do tax it. They have to because it's all set up on the system, an accounting system.
Mm-hmm.
So,
no, that's absolutely right. I mean, and that's where I'm very sympathetic to what you're saying there, Steve. I agree with you on that front because it's not like, when you were doing it or even when I was doing it when it was, more so obviously cash. So I agree and I understand that point completely. But I do think it will create issues in the hospitality field. Real quick, Judy and Bethany, go ahead. You're on KCMO.
Yeah, we didn't get taxed on tips. I waited tables for 10 years, and I got out of it by the time the Reagan administration came along. We did not pay taxes on tips until the Reagan administration. They're the ones that added taxes on tips. So, yeah, it wasn't until the Reagan administration. This is fairly, considering how many years taxes or tips were, which was to ensure prompt service. Tips were never paid. Taxes were never paid on tips.
Well, here's an interesting angle. Thank you, Judy. Do you do it the way Europe does it? Where really you're not tipping people in that industry, in the hospitality industry. They get paid a salary. Now, I prefer the tipping model, generally speaking, because the one time I was in Europe, the service absolutely blew because there's no incentive for anybody. But that may also just be the culture over there. Unfortunately, we're kind of mirroring Europe in a lot of ways these days, so I'm not sure it's going all that well here. But it's something to think about in the way that the industry operates going forward. Now, who knows if this gets through, if this goes to Trump's desk? That remains to be seen. But it is going to be an angle of this that we need to talk about more going forward. See, this is a great point. I just want to put a bow on this conversation. Then I'll get to something else happening that I want to get your input on the Missouri side of the state line. Pete, there are people out there making way more money in the hospitality field than I make. Does that mean I don't have to pay taxes either because I'm a W-2 employee? No, that's an excellent point. I mean, you can make a killing in the hospitality field if you work at certain restaurants or certain businesses. And basically you're saying to those people, well, you don't have to pay taxes. But then a regular employee who's trying to maybe build a career, like a police officer or somebody else in manufacturing, they've got to pay taxes when they're making less than some people are in the hospitality field. Picking winners and losers is never the way to make tax policy. Yes, it's politically savvy. I understand why Trump is proposing it. I really do. And I'm all about all of us paying as few taxes as possible. Like, sign me up for that. The best way to do this is just to have a flat tax for everybody. And I know that we are not going to get that anytime soon. But I'm also not going to sit here and cheer this on as the greatest idea ever, because it's still inherently unfair when the government picks winners and losers. And that is part of this. So I see a lot of people, who are like-minded, who vote the same way I do, saying like, yeah, no tax on tips. Woo! I mean, this is amazing. It's like, no, you've just picked different winners and different losers. That's all you've done. And you've also, I think, created some issues within the hospitality field as well in the process. So, I would have voted for this last night if I was in the House. I'm not, going to die on this hill. But I did want to bring it up because all I see is, the one-trick pony. All I see is the same old talking points of this is the greatest thing ever, and no one dare criticize it. If you do, you're a secret Democrat or neocon, or I don't know. It's just all the same old stuff. It's like, no, we could actually have a nuanced conversation about why this may not be the best idea ever. On the text line, Pete, no matter what, taxation is theft. Oh, that's what I'm talking about, brother. That's exactly right. Spot on, my man. Nailed it. Now to the Missouri side of the state line. This is from Mike Kehoe, the governor of the state. He put this up yesterday on social media, and it's not a done deal, but this is trending, I believe, in the right direction. Governor Kehoe saying this is simple. Cell phones have no place in Missouri classrooms. To support stronger academic performance and protect the mental health of students statewide, Missouri needs distraction-free classrooms. That's why I'm urging General Assembly to pass Senator Henderson's Senate Bill 68 to ban electronic communication devices from the beginning to the end of the school day. Now, the state senator, Mike Henderson, responded to this, and he said, I'm grateful for Governor Kehoe's support. Removing cell phones from classrooms are an important tool for the well-being and education of Missouri's kids. Students deserve to learn in distraction-free environments, and this bill is a big step in the right direction. Now, my kids are young. They're 6, 3, and 1. 1 on Monday, actually. So I know that my kids are not in a place where they're using cell phones, and God willing, they are, well, if I had my druthers, 15 years away from it, but holding Claire off till she's 21 on the cell phone probably is a little bit much. It's probably me grasping at straws. Hey, a guy can dream, right? Come on.
Oh yeah.
Don't get rid of my dream. But I am a huge fan of this. And it's not because I'm a grumpy old man. I mean, John rubs off on me, but not that much. But I even think back to my day when the flip phones were a thing. And we did have flip phones back in high school. But the flip phone was not a computer in your pocket. The flip phone was like learning how to T9 text. There was nothing you could really do outside of play. What was that game on the old Nokias? Was it Snake?
Snake.
Nothing like a game of Snake to pass the time on the old Nokia phones. Oh, man.
That's why you're always in the bathroom a little bit longer.
Speak for yourself
playing
there, Mark.
Snake.
Oh, playing some Snake on the old T9 phones. That was minor league compared to what the phones obviously are now. And I do not envy any high school teacher in Missouri, Kansas, or across America who's got to try to keep the focus for these kids on the schoolwork when they've got computers in their pockets where they can do whatever they want. So this is not me being the grumpy old man. I know some of you are going to say that it is. I think it's just common sense. And as someone who's got little kids, who is, a few years away from having to have this conversation, God willing, I don't want my kids or their peers being able to have cell phones in the classrooms. Now, the pushback on Governor Kehoe, and you know that this is where the conversation is going to go, right? What if there's a school shooting and my kid can't contact me in, God forbid, a school shooting situation? That is a tragic thing to have to think about. I think it's a reality, sadly, that is in the back of every parent's minds. But we don't live our lives and we don't create rules based on the 1 in a million scenario. We don't. And despite what the media will tell you, it still is that 1 in a million scenario. You cannot build legislation or laws based on the 1 in a million scenario. You just can't do it.
It's sort of a false nomer that your kid needs to contact you. I mean, the school has enough trouble with everybody rushing the scene. We've had those incidents before. We're like, calm down, we're doing the best we can here. So I get that you want to know that your kid's safe, but it does bring up a whole bunch of other issues.
It brings up a lot of problems. And the schools are now built to basically have alert systems out there. I mean, that's their job. It's not your kid's job necessarily to text you in, God forbid, some kind of a scenario like that. But the more important conversation is what's best for the learning of the kids. And there's no way you can make the case that the learning of the kids, and by the way, the learning has gone off the cliff. I mean, we talk about it with the guys at the Show Me Institute. We've talked about it with our friends at the Kansas Policy Institute. The learning, I got so worked up I started smacking the microphone around back here. It flipped on me. But the learning of the kids, you sit there and you say to yourself, they're failing miserably. They're not doing the job, and it's not the teacher's fault. I don't blame the teachers for this. They've got more distractions than ever. A lot of them were still stepped back during COVID, and now you're going to tell me, hey, what's the best way to do this? Get the cell phones out of the classrooms. It's a no-brainer. Mike is a teacher out of Olathe. Mike, what do you make of this proposal and support from Governor Kehoe on the Missouri side?
No, he's right. I'm about to go in the classroom. Dude, I've told my kids this, and we practiced. The last thing I want is you to have a cell phone. When they're nervous and stressed and then all of a sudden making noise or possibly distracting or bringing attention to where we're at, we're trying to lay low and stay quiet and be hidden. The last thing they need to be having is something that might bring attention to where we are. We're trying to keep them safe and get them the heck out of there as soon as possible or hunker down. The last thing we want is them to have a device that they're going to be nervous about and using that might bring attention to where we're at. That's the wrong approach. Having them away is the right approach.
How big of an issue, I don't know how long you've been teaching, but how big of an issue have these phones become in the classroom?
Well, this is the first year at the school I'm at. I had them shut down last year, and a few of us did. Now everybody's got them in a sleeve at the front of the room, and it's beautiful. Kids are communicating. And when they're not, when we're done with the work, they communicate or they work or they just have quiet time, and it's a blessing because it's benefiting them. They've really adapted well here where I'm at.
What grade do you teach?
I teach sophomores, a couple of seniors and juniors in one class, but it's sophomore English.
Okay. Wow. Well, so now, and is that just your classroom policy, or is that the school policy to have the phones in the sleeve at the front of the classroom when they walk in?
School policy. It's mandated this year, and it hasn't been a problem. You know what? Fewer fights because there's fewer teeing up the fight that's going to happen in the commons. It's all these things. We've had almost 0 fights this year, and I think a lot of the bullying crap and the setting it up and all this other garbage that leads to conflict in between classes, it's been eliminated just by having the cell phones away, because you can't bully, you can't tee it up, you can't meet your girlfriend in the bathroom, all that kind of stuff.
Wow. I didn't think about all the other benefits. Nice job there, Mike. Well done, buddy. That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, the old days, you had to hear about the fights word of mouth. And then you might be like, dang, I missed out on it. No one told me about the fight after school.
We used to have smoke signals when I was a kid.
Oh, that's great. And the other thing that Mike noted there that I think is important, and he's right, is that kids get stressed. They get worked up about something in the classroom. They go to their phones. They go for that cheap dopamine hit. And listen, we've all done it. I've noticed it. I get stressed out with the kids. Something happens. I just walk away. What do? You pick up your phone. And you just get a quick dopamine hit. It's one thing for me as an adult to do that, recognize what's going on, and realize, like, that's not the best way to handle any situation. But what are you going to tell and do with a 16-year-old who doesn't have a fully developed brain? I mean, every state should be passing this. Now, it sounds like a lot of schools are doing this on their own, but state legislatures in Missouri and Kansas should be looking at this. I mean, who's going to be against this? Big cell phone? The cell phone lobby? I don't even know if that exists.